Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, morning, evening, anytime, wherever you are right now. It's 3 p.m. here, afternoon East Coast for me. I want to thank you all for joining us. We do have a bit of a change here to our webinar today as we have recently had some news that will impact a little bit of what we wanted to discuss about. But I first wanted to, thank you all for joining us and introduce some of you all to NASCIC if this is your first NASCIC webinar, or if not, welcome back. Um, NASCIC itself is the North American Spinal Cord Injury Consortium. It was formed in 2018. Membership includes 62 community-led organizations, over 350 individuals with lived experience, and 129 partner organizations that has a much wider reach than just those numbers as well, because we have many organizations that then represent their own individuals with spinal cord injury. The mission of NASCIC is to bring about unified achievements in research, care, cure, and policy by supporting collaborative efforts across the spinal cord injury community.
Recording in
And
progress.
a lot of that was mostly to make sure that individuals that are participating in research and involved in research have that lived experience um, representation, so that way things are, um, being done in a proper manner. Um, to achieve this mission at NASCIC, we help identify gaps, communicate resources, and really try to be that conduit of collaboration for uh, the community of individuals living with spinal cord injury and the many stakeholders and outreach groups that are in the space to try and make sure that we're able to translate something that is meaningful to our community. If you are not already a member, we'd love for you to become a member today. It's free. You can scan the QR code there or sign up on our website. And that can be something that, is easily done. And if you have any questions or comments about that, feel free to put things in the chat. We have a few representatives from NASCIC that can help assist with that. Or you can always email us at info@nascic.org. All right, so as we start to get into some of the content today, this originally was going to be a webinar discussing the best way to create a proposal and engagement with the CDMRP, SCIRP program, which I think many of you are familiar with. However, due to the ever-changing political landscape that we are under right now, um, we just received word early this morning that the spinal cord injury research program has actually been cut completely from the budget of CDMRP for the fiscal year of 2025. So that's extremely unfortunate, and we certainly didn't want to talk about how great you can make a proposal when there's nothing to apply to. Now, there are certainly other funding mechanisms out there for spinal cord injury research, and we'll discuss a little bit of those. But it is, really with tough news to share that that is not included in the budget for 2025. And, there are some ongoing efforts that are going to be done now to hopefully, advocate for some of that funding to be brought back. And, hopefully it is something that can be brought back at the very least next year. And if not, something that can be done for this year as well. Um, but with that, I want to get into a little bit of our content today, which is looking at some of the challenges in spinal cord injury clinical trials. And I think this will be not news to many of you that are here, as far as looking at what makes it so hard to run a clinical trial for spinal cord injury. The heterogeneity of the spinal cord injury population is really challenging. because you have so many varying people. I'm sure a lot of you have heard the analogy of using, everyone with a spinal cord injury is like a snowflake, and everyone's, um, you know, shape and makeup is a little bit different. So it's really hard to fit everyone into a specific box that you can use for a nice clinical trial. Um, and, I think that that's definitely not a bad thing. It's great. We have, so many people here, living with spinal cord injuries, and the only thing they really have in common is that they have a spinal cord injury. We're all individual people. We all have varying, challenges that are important to us. Um, but trying to get some sense of a good inclusion criteria for a trial is very challenging. There's limited patient pools for those specific interventions as far as the just sheer numbers, especially then if you're trying to find and do a intervention that needs to be, geographically limited to the constraint of one city or a few sites. There's a lot of variability in spontaneous recovery after spinal cord injury. We know that we've seen, some changes in standard of care over the years that have improved or increased the amount of individuals who are now having complete or incomplete injuries versus complete injuries. And once again, that's very, different across every single person with a spinal cord injury. Even if you have the exact same, level of injury and mechanism of injury, your outcomes can be widely um, disparaged across, person to person. Um, there's a lot of difficulty in defining meaningful outcomes for participants, and some of this work has been done, going back 20 plus years. But it is something that, we still as a community are challenged with what we are doing, or how we are all together, talking about what is the most meaningful outcome for each of us. Like I said earlier, we're all individual people, that just so happen to have a spinal cord injury or be working towards helping individuals with spinal cord injury. And, what is that number one priority is definitely different to every individual, especially then when you take in injury level, and the severity and then time since injury. Additionally, spinal cord injury clinical trials can be extremely costly and lengthy for the duration to make sure that we're meeting proper endpoints. So what's the big need for community engagement, right? Why does this even matter? Um, Community engagement is really buying into the nothing about us without us mentality and making sure that research addresses actual patient priorities and needs. It's not something that, an engineer or a clinician is dreaming up and says, "Oh, I know what's best, and this is what's going to help everyone with a spinal cord injury," but really something that people that are living day in and day out with a spinal cord injury will benefit from. It's a great way to improve clinical trial design, recruitment, and retention. We certainly know that, maybe if your target demographic is for individuals with high level complete spinal cord injuries, trying to get everyone to come into a lab or come into a research setting at 8 a.m., 5 days a week might be really challenging because they rely on others for care and, transportation and everything that can, go into that as far as how we're able to best support people who can participate in clinical trials. Um, Once again, the outcome measures and what is relevant to each individual person is so important. And if you can engage the community actively, it enhances the relevance of those outcomes. That goes right in line with increasing the likelihood of success and translating this into clinical care, because it's a way that, already fits in what the community is wanting and needing. It also is a great way to build trust between researchers and the community. I know as a community member, I had my spinal cord injury about uh, 15 years ago, and I've been told multiple times that, oh, it's 5 more years, 10 more years for a cure to spinal cord injury, and I know Others who have been injured much longer than that have heard very similar time frames, and that can sometimes, you know, erode the trust that is there between individuals living with spinal cord injury and researchers who are hoping to help engage the community and build a solution for them. Um, the impacts of poor engagement is really just looking at, it might not address community priorities, can be really hard to get individuals to participate. Um, and, some of the other factors that I already have stated as far as, how these projects can be something that, is a great idea in theory, but not something that in practice translates to what the community needs. Some available resources out there is actually there's a paper that was published about a year and a half ago that is a case study on exactly what is helpful with engaging the community. Um, this study identified 5 different phases of meaningful engagement of preparation, discovery, implementation, dissemination, and maintenance as a way to make sure that individuals with lived experience are involved at every step of that project to really, you know, let the research have the best opportunity for success. Um, there's always going to be challenges and hurdles that come up when we're doing research, and that's something that, is just a part of the game, but it's also a big challenge to make sure that, you're just like you include subject matter experts in different parts of your project. They are including those with lived experience to be those experts in living with a spinal cord injury. There's some concrete actions that are recommended out of this paper, including dedicated funding for participation, standardizing of compensation practices as far as, some individuals may be on public assistance and may not be able to be compensated in a kind of more financial way, but other ways that individuals can be compensated for their time, just as any other consultant is on a project. And training programs both for researchers and community members, which leads in a little bit to a project that we've done here at NASCIC, which is our spinal cord injury research advocacy course. Um, but that's a way to really make sure that everyone's on that level playing field. So with some of the work that we're doing here at NASCIC, we do have a project engagement database that you know is individuals with lived experience and caregivers that are open to looking at providing feedback and advisory input on research. This is not something that folks are, participating in research directly through these endeavors, but it's something where they can be a partner in the research and really help guide and shape research going forward. So that is something that is really valuable to everyone living with spinal cord injury and can help those individuals who are more focused to, um, the direct inclusion criteria of each study. Um, like I said at the beginning of the call, our meeting was supposed to be talking a lot about the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Program, CDMRP, and its spinal cord injury research program through that. But like I said, we've learned that it has been cut from the budget completely for 2025. So that is something that we at NASCIC are going to be continuing to work on to increase the advocacy and try to get some of that funding restored. Um, if anyone is interested in working with us directly on that project, please don't hesitate to reach out to us so we can make sure that we have, kind of all hands on deck, as this is something that's really important. While SCIRC wasn't the, only funding mechanism for spinal cord injury, it is a $40 million per year program. And that will be quite a big cut to the spinal cord injury research community. Um, But with that being said, it really highlights even more than ever that we need to make sure that projects that are being funded are something that is really targeted towards what the community wants and is really something that is going to hopefully benefit the community in the best way possible. But with that being said, and I know this is, not exactly how we wanted this webinar to go, but I'd want to open it up to, questions and answers, probably more questions than answers that we will have. Um, but there's, a lot of unknowns right now within the community as far as how we're going to be able to continue some of this research. But if anyone has questions, feel free to use the raise hand function or comments. And we also are more than happy to discuss offline about different activities that are going on.
Hey, I'm Laura Bennett. I joined because I saw your note or email about the kind of switch in focus following the news that broke yesterday, and curious if others are on the call too who would just love to pick your brains on like what you're doing to activate your grassroots if you're one of the 23 CDMRP programs that had their funding completely zeroed out for the rest of fiscal year 25.
Yeah, I mean it's really a big challenge here as far as what's going on. We do work with the DHRC. Uh, Give me a second to get through some acronym soup here. Um, the Defense Health,
Hmm.
uh, Jared, are you
Research
good?
consortium. Yeah, we
Research?
do too.
Yes, thank you. Defense Health Research Consortium, which brings together kind of all the projects and indications that are funded under CDMRP. And we're working with them on, a plan more so to get, things pushed forward because, um, you know, as as we see it, this is, a big blow to the community. Um, but with that being said, there's plenty of other funding resources that are out there. Now it still is to be seen, what other government funding is going to look like for the foreseeable future. But it's something where we're trying to join in with different advocates throughout other indications to the DHRC, as well as within the spinal cord injury community of all of our kind of partner organizations of the Christopher Reeve Foundation, United Fight Paralysis, United Spinal, etc. John, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, Ian. Terrible news. I was just searching around trying to find anything and nothing publicly available yet. So clearly you've got inside channels that some of us don't have access to. But I wonder, obviously there was a thought about securing funding through the DoD SCIRT program, and now that's off the table. As more and more of these governmental funders are getting their budgets cut and restricted and programs are disappearing, that's going to create an even bigger level of competition for the remaining resources and funds that are available. Um, and I'm just wondering how you're intending to manage that. Obviously, I think the competitive granting process has always been a difficult one, and it's just becoming more and more difficult. So, do you have any ideas on what we can do to try to make this approach more attractive and more likely to be funded, given the narrowing avenues for seeking funding?
Yeah, that's fantastic, John. I do think, as if there's a smaller pool of money that's going to be dispersed, through all of spinal cord injury research, it's even more important to make sure that your research is aligned with what the community wants. That is, something that the CDMRP did really well, as far as requiring individuals with lived experience to serve as consultants and, community partners on their research. Not every funding mechanism requires that. But I think it certainly is a way to, set your proposal out ahead of some others as far as being able to um, make sure that you're doing something that is going to be very valuable and translatable to the community.
See, Carl's throwing a question in the chat about.
Yeah, there was another hand up. I apologize. I thought I saw it, but Carl, your question as far as does the Paralyzed Veterans of America have any ability to shift any DoD money? Not that I know of, but that is a little bit above my pay grade. I know that the PVA itself does have funding that they put forward for research programs. That's comes from a whole different pot of money. Um, but I think, as far as what we can do as a community, it's really important right now to pay attention to some of the stuff that we're going to be putting out here in the future as far as um, trying to restore some of the funding. It was cut 57% across the board of all CDMRP funding, and that wasn't just a straight across the board. Obviously, it meant that there were multiple.
Yeah, I was just wondering if the PVA had any sort of political sway or anything within the Department of Defense. And at the least, I guess we should be contacting them to see what they think of this.
Yeah, it's certainly something we will be doing. The Paralyzed Veterans of America as a organization is one of our members, as well as, I know that they work closely with the DHRC as well, to make sure that, we can, use any kind of just channeling of voices to get, someone with the right ear to hear and hopefully understand the importance of this research funding.
Hey, Ian, do you mind if I ask, with regard to, I guess, the announcement that hasn't been announced, so to speak, what, are we going to draft a letter? Is NASCAR thinking about just drafting a letter? And then what I would suggest is that if that's the case, you have pods of people sending it out to various places, because it's hitting one thing is not going to do anything. We're gonna have to really use NASCIC for all it's worth, so to speak, milk it. I'm being direct here. That's my first thought.
Yeah, no, certainly, Sasha. Right now we're waiting. We have a meeting with the Defense Health Research Consortium tomorrow. But NASCIC itself will be drafting a letter that we can get folks to sign on, and then giving people some language. I mean, it's not our bread and butter to do a lot of advocacy or lobbying advocacy like this, but it is something that we have other partner organizations that do quite a bit of. I know I've seen general thoughts that are coming out of U2FP, Reeve, United Spinal, and PVA, and some of those other organizations that have been pointing to this as well. But it's definitely one of those things where the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and hopefully we can have a lot of individuals who can share their own stories about how important this funding is, as well as speaking for the community as a whole. Carl, you have your hand raised?
Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, one of my other advocacies are nature conservation, and they often put together a letter, and then on their internet sites, they're able to have each person. They have put all your information in there, and give you where your congressmen, your representatives, and your two senators, and they have those very easy to send to them. And I think with all of the organizations that are involved, if you said, hey, yeah, all these organizations, and then we got people that are in our communities to go ahead and send these letters, it might have an impact. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm really familiar with those kind of mechanisms that you've mentioned as far as you can put in your address and it makes it pretty easy to send an email right to your representatives. That's not something that we at NASCIC directly have used in the past, but
Mhm.
we know that many of our partner organizations do. So
Great.
once again, I think it's going to be a little bit of a all hands on deck kind of approach, uh, and get as much attention to this as possible.
Emilian. Is that how am I saying your name correctly? See
Hi,
your hand
yeah,
raised.
Yes,
my name
please.
is Emilienne. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
First off, I just want to say how sorry I am to hear this news about the cut in research funding. That's really awful. And I wish you absolutely all the best in pushing for this. I am uh very interested in a specific community engagement stage for my company. I'm hoping it's okay to ask this in this forum because I think you could have great feedback. I work for Neuralink, and as you know, we have been in clinical trials for a year now. We also have an internal consumer advisory board that we've been contracting with since mid 2020. It's a group of 5 people with spinal cord injury, quadriplegia due to spinal cord injury. Um, and they come with pretty different perspectives, different severity of injury, different duration. They have different preferred assistive tech. So they bring some great perspective to us. And over the years, we've been relying on them for feedback before we had our clinical trials. We still contract with them now. And an internal challenge we found at our company is how do we strike the right balance between what kind of feedback we should seek from our consumer advisory board compared to directly getting the feedback from trial participants? And I'd love to hear if you have any experience or you've heard of examples where companies internally connect their consumer advisory boards or their internal patient advocacy groups with trial participants and ways that this could be productive for a company. This is something we're really interested in exploring, but we're not sure. We don't have a path or like a model for how to do it.
It's great. Thank you. Ian, do you want to take that one? I'll take
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, no problem. And Jared, you can chime in as well. I think it's a big challenge when you're looking at, engaging the community and using a advisory board of, just a few people to try and represent the whole community as possible. You obviously want them to represent themselves and their own lived experience, but also try to speak as well as they're informed for the community at large. So that's something that we've, at NASCIC, we've tried to do with our research advocacy course, um, is making sure that individuals with lived experience can understand kind of spinal cord injury as a whole and be speaking, to a larger group. So that's, one method that we recommend is, finding individuals who have used that course. Um, outside of that, it's really all about relationships, and it boils down to making sure that individuals feel like their input is being valued, and making sure that they feel very comfortable to be able to share all their feedback. I think some projects have worked better than others as far as how they've been able to incorporate in, varying different stakeholders um, throughout that design process. And I know if you're looking at, a clinical trial such as yours, where it can be a little bit challenging to um, have individuals who are participating, but then also have people who are more of, an active or a, a observing advisor. And then you have, people who have varying different levels of the technology and the intervention itself. So, the best suggestion I can give you is, really making sure that everyone is on the same page and there's not, five different groups that are running different forms of, patient and user engagement.
Just as a quick follow-up, I've heard from people not having spinal cord injury, but who participated in other brain implant trials, for blindness in this case. I had heard from someone who had been in one of these trials that he had experienced frustration that he didn't have an internal advocate that he could speak to for like kind of micro issues, things he didn't want to elevate to the FDA, things he didn't want to discuss with other trial participants to not bias their experience, but things he wanted to still be able to communicate to someone who spoke his language more or less. But we don't right now have good examples of like what that would look like to have an internal advocacy board that trial participants could reach out to. We're thinking it'd be nice to understand like if you've heard of companies doing this, how it worked, what worked, what didn't, and what kind of value it added.
Yeah, so just a little bit about that and where you're kind of pointing. It's very useful to have a third party when you're in the realm of corporate industry. It's very useful to have a third party to kind of be the intermediate between you and your community advisory board. That's one thing. And then it's really important that your community advisory board is distinct from your clinical trial participants so that you don't have a bleed over of your data, right? It's, you want very clean data. Now, and we've actually worked with Neuralink in the past to help create that community advisory board that you spoke of.
Yeah, I was part of that team that got the candidates from you.
I thought so. Yeah, great. So, but there's a lot of institutional education and knowledge that is really relevant, right, to keep that moving forward as you will continue to work through that. So, and in terms of having like a one-on-one place for people to be able to voice their opinion or voice with their concerns about a clinical trial, when you're in industry, you want to be cognizant of like your public perception with that. Like, what is there a reason to have this? Is it just to comfort the people living with the condition, right? Or is it to sort of mitigate any issues from the public, right? So there's a lot to be, and that's stuff that we can work with you on, like that our community works with people on to make sure that everything is transparent and that everyone's in the know and how to speak about these type of things. And we can create different community advisory boards for different roles and functions. So I don't know, does that help answer any of your questions?
I have a lot of follow-up, but I don't want to take over the conversation here. Would it be appropriate to email you to
Please? Yes.
Okay,
absolutely.
great. Thank
you. In fact, I'm going to reach out to you guys about a follow-up meeting for next week. So that's perfect.
Great.
I'll put my email in the chat.
Thanks.
Just so everyone is, up to speed as well, I did just throw into the chat. There's two different documents there that talk about what actually has been released from Congress as far as the state of CMRP for the funding itself. There's a letter from Mitch McConnell and Ken Calvert, who are on the Senate and House Appropriations Committee, as well as a carve out or a document that shows exactly which programs are funded and which programs, but it just doesn't list the programs that aren't funded. But you can see in there that there is just a sheer overall reduction in the amount of funding that has been, agreed upon within this year's fiscal cycle for CDMRP. Um, but you know, moving forward, I think it's really important that we as a community, um, stay strong as far as being able to pull together any resources that we do have to continue on with creating, projects that really engage the community best and also are something that, can lead to the highest possibility of improvement in quality of life for those living with spinal cord injury. There's all different types of projects that were funded through SCRP and are funded through varying other um, research organs or nonprofit groups and other organizations. Um, but we look at some of the projects that SCRP did fund as far as um, you know challenges to get something translated from a clinical trial or early stage investigation. Um, and really just making sure that it is something that uh, the need for community engagement is highlighted right there alongside all the projects that we're working on because you know if it's something that sounds great on paper and doesn't translate, then that's not the best use of um, funds there. So as John mentioned earlier, if that pot is getting a little bit smaller, we want to do what we can to make sure that, as a community, we're using that and advocating for its use to be done in ways that have the highest opportunity of translation.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. I was thinking it might be useful to create a working group to sort of take some of the ideas that were talked about here today and see how we can implement some form of action to bring everybody together. Like Sasha, I really like what you had to share, and Carl. So I don't know if that's something that you'd be interested in or not, but
Ever the advocate. No, count me in. Just tell me what to write.
thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. Please be on the lookout for something, coming from us here soon as we, try to understand a little bit more of what has changed. As like I said, things are moving pretty quickly. Um, and I think it would be fantastic to have, like I said earlier, kind of all hands on deck to make sure that, this isn't just the start of funding that gets pulled, but this is, something that is able to energize the community and get, this funding reinstated and protect other funding as well.
Perhaps we perhaps we reach out to the private industry and ask them to cover the difference, since there seems to be a resurgence towards that methodology. I was just looking here, some of the private companies that how much money they have in their investment that they have to to invest in their one particular research, around 680 million, many orders of magnitude larger than the CDMRP, which funds several over probably 20 different trials. So that might be one place the working group could go to work on, is really reaching out to the private sector. Anyway, just a thought. I think it'd be great to create a working group. I think that we all here are on the same page in terms of dealing with the consequences of what has occurred here lately. And I think it's been a very productive conversation to really get some of that out so that we can move forward from here. So if anybody has anything that they want to say or any other questions or anything like that, please, this is a good time. Feel free. We can always talk
Jared,
about it
if you
offline
don't
as
mind,
well.
and Ian, I'd like to just say that this is really messed up for everybody, obviously, but I think that what we started in 2017 and what you all have now is a network of people that can make calls, that can make things. And when I'm reading this Pete Hegseth letter here, we'll write to him. I mean, just we can't, we start need to sort of list the targets we need to go to, team building, and then actions. Because if we talk about it meeting after meeting, it'll never get done. Just get something out there. A consensus statement. I could read over it if you all wish. I'll take some time, look over whatever. But I think we need to start with some kind of consensus statement.
I think just to point out that what skirts funds are things that tend to be really hard to get funded at NIH.
Right.
And the scope of work for you could get some of this funded at NIDLR, but the funds allocated to NIDLR are limited and make it hard to do certain things. So these are a lot of what's not going to move forward or people would potentially submit also are not things that industry would fund unless it's out of the goodness of their heart and community work because they're not commercializable, right? So
Yeah, Rachel, that's a really good point there as far as, what exactly SCRP was funding. It is something that is, you know, that's why we've been so passionate about it throughout the years and really glad that they've brought in so much community engagement from, requiring individuals with lived experience to be consultants on the projects, even in the programmatic committee and review panels.
Melissa's one of our biggest champions.
Yes, she is. Um, and so, I think it's really important to use that as rationale as far as, why this program is so important. Because it is things that is really hard to get funded elsewhere. So I do see Carl, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I was just, going on what Jared was saying about getting a lot of the SCRP money, there are clinical trials and translational studies being done. And, I do believe that as those studies come out of the laboratory and get into the clinic, that, CROs for not just spinal cord injury, but the other congressionally mandated projects that Sasha mentioned. If you go to the CROs maybe and say, hey, guys, you're going to lose business if we don't get these studies out of the laboratories and into the clinic. Can you support us in signing a letter or whatever? Just another thought that occurred to me when I heard Jared mention industry.
Fantastic. Well, I think it's really helpful to have a lot of people commenting in the chat as far as, being um, open to being a part of a working group. I think, I don't know if we necessarily want to spin up a whole working group and just have meetings to talk about things like Sasha was mentioning, as far as, we'll, flag everyone who has commented that they want to be involved and send some things their way. So that way we can hopefully get something out and then send it to the broader community as far as here's what we need here's some talking points for you to, share how important this is and get, as many people, aware of it as possible. Like I said earlier, getting that squeaky wheel gets the grease kind of mentality and be a little bit more loud about it. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. I can, I'm more than happy to stay around as far, and, also, please don't ever hesitate to reach out to any of us here at NASCIC. Like I said at the top end of our call, our kind of general email is info@nascic.org. I will also include my email here in the meeting chat. If anyone has questions, feel free to reach out. But for those who have raised your hand in the chat, be be on the lookout for something from us, and we'll try to get something going here soon because we do understand time is a little bit of the essence, and then also making sure that we can best support some of our strong advocates that have been working at CDMRP to make sure that they're still able to work to make sure that these types of projects can get funded either um, somewhere else, or if we can restore funding through CDMRP for this year or going forward. So thank you so much for your time. I wish it was more of a happy conversation, but it's it's one that we're having, and we need to just use it as motivation to um, do what we all do as far as being advocates. And I think it reminds me of an interesting quote that I saw a few years back of, I'm not an advocate because I want to be, I'm an advocate because I have to be. And I think, a lot of us here understand that, very deeply and very personally. Um, and, we want to do as much as we can to, um, help other individuals who can join the club of spinal cord injury at, any point. So thank you all so much for your time. And we look forward to having better news going forward. But also continue to pay attention to some of the work we're doing here at NASCIC. We do have ongoing projects that are funded through other mechanisms where we're still looking for individuals with lived experience to serve as advisors in, as well as to participate in. If you want to help, continue on with getting research into being something that can translate out into clinical practice. So thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Hey, one last thing. I just dropped a thing in there for you guys to consider NASCIC. It's organizational responses that urologists are starting to pose. Might as well feed off of that, chat GPT it, whatever. We need to get the voice out. But there's organizational responses, medical responses, hospital responses, just from the urology standpoint. And I just put it on Urology Times. So it's out there. People know about this now.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, we're not the only indication that has been cut, and there's
Well,
going to
you
be.
Google it now, right now, everything's popping up right now with cuts.
Yep.
It's everywhere, unfortunately. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Sasha.
Yeah, you're welcome, guys. Take care. Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you all for joining.